We have new developments in the Kursk area where yesterday the Ukrainians, or actually the day before yesterday, the Ukraine launched a new offensive in the Kursk region where they had already been in fighting since the 6th of August of last year. They launched what they're characterizing anyway as a surprise attack further into the north where Russia had been squeezing the incursion to the downside. And then they launched this attack with 20 some odd armored vehicles and a number of infantrymen and made some initial breakthroughs up to a village north of where the previous line had been. Now, when I got up this morning, I wanted to check and see what the current status of the fighting was, to see how much further they may have gone, to see what kind of countermeasures the Russians had done. And to my surprise, there haven't been any further advances. In fact, let me just run straight to the map here and show you what we have discovered. This is really quite surprising. So, just as a quick recap, this area right here is where the Ukrainian side launched their new offensive. I think the line was somewhere around this area here, and they moved roughly from here up to this area here. There's a small village at the intersection of these terrain features you see right here on the map. But then overnight, Russia actually blunted that and has taken a small portion of it back right here. This is now in the contested area, and for you may not remember this in the map system here, the way it works, the key is these gray areas are contested areas. So it's not controlled by either side, but it's being controlled. This was in the yellow area, which was under Ukraine control. It's now in the contested area. Ukraine, for its part, did take one small additional piece of territory, a couple of fields in this area. So it went from basically here to out to this side. That's obviously quite inconsequential. But then what is very consequential is you see this huge area in red from yesterday. So while the Ukraine side was focusing its manpower and probably mobilizing a number of folks from elsewhere in the Kursk area so that they could have some concentration of forces here, the Russians took advantage of it overnight and now taken back these large number of fields. So you can see in this one area alone, Russia retook more territory than the Ukraine side did here in their incursion at considerable cost. Moreover, on the left flank, there was another one moving here. We also showed you yesterday that the Russians had taken this area here. That's now in this particular color scheme. The purple is Russian territory. So that went from red into the purple. Now then they have moved further in with the incursion into basically the left neck of this incursion. And by the way, here is the border between Russia and Ukraine. Let me scroll out a little bit so you can kind of see where that is. And then you see this additional territory is being contested now. So the Russians went from here into here, and on the other flank, on the western flank, they went from this area into here. So you can start again to really see the methodology that the Russians are doing here. They're putting pressure on the Ukraine side on the top of this incursion, but also they're squeezing in the neck. They've already gone from there to there, and now then you see they made another pretty sizable chunk into the contested area here, and you can see they don't have to go too much further, and they're going to cut off this road right here. This is one of the primary feeder lanes that the Ukrainians have to get supplies in and out to the entire force. The town of Suja in the south right here is kind of where they're having their headquarters and where they're assembling their troops, medical support, and then ammunition, food, and everything else that they will then shovel out to the remainder of its forces in the area. If this road here is cut, and obviously they already have this one under fire control, so they can already cut this off with artillery fire and direct fire from other weapon systems. But you see, it's not much further at all till they get to the last one. And just so you understand how the military systems work here, you don't have to have physical control to be able to cut off supplies there. If you have fire control over it, where you have within range of your direct fire weapon systems, then you can literally cut the whole thing off. So in my view right here, this is probably the priority of effort for the Russians, because once this happens, then the rest of the entire incursion becomes at risk. Because if the Ukraine has to go through fields, like, because obviously there'll still be some territory here that they have, but there are no obvious big roads that they can move equipment and supplies over easily. And especially if the weather turns rainy instead of frozen, then it turns into a morass here, and it becomes very, very difficult to get large numbers of supplies in and out. So this is at a whole problem here. This this incursion is starting to look very weak, and in the fact that barely 36 hours in, it's already been blunted. It's not going any further, and it's already starting to go back while they're losing additional territory in the north, the west, and in the east. So if you're looking at this from just a military perspective, you're saying, okay, things are not looking that great for the Ukraine side. So you would expect, okay, well, in a normal environment, you would expect to hear the president or the leader of the Ukraine side say, well, all right, we're running into some difficulties here, but we're still fighting hard or something like that. But as we've been seeing more and more with President Zelensky, the actual facts on the ground seem inconsequential when it comes to him promoting his view of things the way he would like them to be. And we have another example of that here. Earlier today, he went on and made an address that he posted on his YouTube channel to explain exactly what's going on, in his view, in the Kursk area.
Сьогодні рівно 5 місяців від початку наших дій на Курщині, і ми зберігаємо буферну зону на російській території. Активно знищуємо там російський військовий потенціал. За час Курської операції ворог втратив вже понад 38 тисяч своїх солдатів тільки на цьому одному напрямку. Із них близько 15 тисяч безповоротно. Росіяни перекинули на Курщину сильні свої підрозділи. Там задіяні солдати з Північної Кореї. Важливо, що всю цю свою силу окупант не може зараз спрямувати на інші наші напрямки, зокрема на Донеччину, зокрема проти Сум, зокрема на Харківщину чи Запоріжжя. Я дякую всім нашим воїнам, які повертають війну додому в Росію.
Okay. Now, it may feel good to, quote, take the fight back into Russia and on their territory. Certainly that's the case. I mean, nobody in Russia wants that. Putin doesn't want that. And it's a sore point for many of the Russians, without question. But what does that gain you in terms of the war? How is that helping your side improve its situation or to win? If you're fighting a war, you have to be fighting to win the war. If you're not fighting to win the war, then honestly, what's the point? What are you doing? Because if you conclude that you don't have the capacity to win the war, then to continue prosecuting it means that you're only going to continually lose until at some point your force is literally ground to dust, and it'll get to some point, and no one knows where this point is, where it will cease to function as a coherent unit and it will literally collapse. I mean, it's not like a situation where, all right, if this was 100% when it started and it's whittled down to, 75% and then 40%, and then it can literally just keep going until it gets to 0%. It doesn't work that way. There'll be some percent when it gets down to that's different for every force and every time, but then it will suddenly just collapse. And man, we have to be we're certainly closer to that point now than we have been. And many of the signs are starting to show, many of the cracks are starting to appear that shows that they're probably getting close to that point where they're going to break. You're seeing large scale desertions. You're seeing the difficulty of training of the troops, difficulty of mobilizing new people being trained to fight and then not fighting once they get there. So all of those things are starting to go. And then, of course, you look on the battle map and you see the territory continuing to shrink. And then even in this particular one here, which he's loving to tout. And again, unfortunately, this has some positive effect from the Ukraine perspective in the media sphere. So on social media, in the major media, in the mainstream media for the West, because it's getting lots of headlines. And people are putting a microphone on his face and listening to what he has to say and putting it out on their own media there. So there is some positive response there, but there is no actual military significance to it. Even on that map I showed you just a second ago. In fact, let me run back to that because I'm going to show you a couple of other things from it. When you look at the area where they have gone into, I mean, let me zoom really close in here so you can see. So this one little village here, I think it's called Berdin, this one right here. And it's a little more than just a few hamlets and little houses on a couple of a T intersection road. That's the extent of the village. It's not really much to it. That's it. That's what they have captured so far. So obviously there is no military significance to what they have taken here at all. It's just generated some headlines. But then in the context of his comments there, he said, yeah, but this keeps the enemy from doing things in the West. And he specifically referred to the Donetsk area. And well, let's go look and see there. Let's see. That's what he told us. Well, let's take a look. So we go down to the Kupiansk area. And by the way, we'll talk more about this, the overall situation in our afternoon briefing. We got a 3:00 show we got for you today. And a number of things. There's been some generals that Putin moved into the Kursk area. There's been some other activity on the U.S. side, some more things in the European side, etc. We'll talk about this. Kupiansk has seen some additional Russian forces moving forward. But let's go down to what the main area is, and that is around in the Pokrovsk area. So this is the Pokrovsk area we talk about a lot. And in the area down here, we've talked about it before, the Karakova. That's an area that fell pretty much yesterday, and it's now officially fallen today. And we see that the Russian side, again, has continued to make additional progress in the last 24 hours. There have been, even in these areas here, there's more contested area that the Russians are fighting for. Everything is moving forward. You see there, again, like this is becoming their pattern. The Russians are moving towards to try to cut these roads off so that all the troops in here get cut off and either have to withdraw or they'll get captured, etc. And in this area here, I want to point out something about Karakova and why this fell. I don't want to just show you that it's in the red area here, but we want to look and see what is the reason why. And I've shown you a number of times the German writer Julian Rupka, who has lots of stuff. He's a very pro-Ukraine. He's got a Ukraine flag on his X post. But he's also one of the most honest and straightforward. It says this is actually what's happening. He posted a video this morning that talked about what happened in Karakova.
If we keep the recordings running, now almost 2 weeks later, the entire city is under Russian control. Here we see it, along with brand new footage, video shots taken just this morning, which we haven't shown yet, reveal to us that the Russians have now reached the farthest western point in Kurakova, where we have also raised their flag, and now we are only about, as we can see on the map, 1 kilometer away from Dakhna. The footage we just saw was still, as mentioned, about 4 kilometers away from Dakhna. Further south, there are also heavy battles, which we will now watch in a video. We've seen Uspenevka here, this central place, a very small place, but a central place because it's located at so many roads. We can look at it again. So we have numerous intersections here that meet and go in all directions. The area was taken by the Russians, and we're currently reviewing some detailed footage that shows their movement slightly north of Konstantinopolsk, which isn't marked here on the map, but right next to it as they try to advance further here. And once again, the big problem the Ukrainian army is facing, which is that although they have built massive defense structures, they don't have the manpower to occupy and defend them.
Okay, that is such a big issue. Don't miss that. It's not just that the Russians are moving forward. Part of the reason why is because the Ukraine side doesn't have the manpower. Now, we've been telling you here in recent episodes, and we've been highlighting the fact that there have been so many desertions and people running away from the fight. There was that famous new brigade that was formed in France. It was trained in France. And then, according to the information out just today, the Ukrainian command admits that, yes, somewhere around 50 actually fled in France and disappeared, never to be seen again. And somewhere around 1,700 others abandoned the fight once they got back into Ukraine. So they didn't even go into battle, which was about 40% of the strength of this brand new brigade. But as Italian military expert Thomas Steiner reported on an X post right now, the manpower problems are bigger than that even. And Gary, if you can toss that one up there, you see that Ukraine's mobilization of men is a mess. They're putting the cart before the horse. All existing brigades lack infantry. Nobody wins a war without infantry. Ukraine is using freshly mobilized men to create new brigades while existing brigades bleed out on the line. But as he continues in, as soon as the new brigades are ready, they're broken up and the infantry is sent to plug gaps in depleted brigades. This is the worst kind of mobilization. Either put the new brigades in as a whole, units into the front to replace depleted units and brigades, which are then rebuild. Or you see, I won't read the rest of that. The last part there is the one that's really important, though. Creating new brigades, which are then broken up, creates a bunch of useless commands. a total waste of manpower. Ukraine needs to stop creating new brigades and focus on training replacement infantry for its existing brigades. And that I can't reinforce his assessment there enough. Even American experience in history from both World War II and what we used while I was on active duty, and we were prepared to do this in the war, the Desert Storm that I fought in a tank unit, 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, in that the U.S. would form its divisions, its brigades, etc. And then as they had attrition, as they lost people, then they would send in replacements for that unit. And that makes the most sense. And you can understand why when you think about it. If you have a command structure, you have the brigade commander, the brigade command sergeant major, and all the enlisted that go along with that, first sergeants, sergeants first class, et cetera, all the way down. You have the brigade commander, the battalion commanders, the staff at each one of those levels, intelligence staffs, all the different branches all the way down. And now as you lose people, you'll replace that. You'll plug back in. So the organization develops a personality, and it develops experience as an organization. And so as you lose people, it'll make your capacity go up and down, because obviously you have untrained people that come in or minimally trained, and that's going to have an effect on what the unit can even do. But you maintain all of that experience. When you just say, all right, when this brigade bleeds out, it doesn't exist anymore, and then you're training an entire new brigade, that means you have to recreate the wheel every single time. But now then, every time you create a new infrastructure and a new headquarters organization, you create an infant, basically, that has no institutional experience and knowledge. I cannot reinforce one of his comments there, especially, that this is the worst way to do it. So you're suffering lots of manpower problems. You're suffering desertions. You're having trouble getting people in anyway. And then the people that you have, you're using them in the least effective way you can imagine. And this is not, I don't know why they're trying to basically recreate the wheel, where they're trying to do things that historically don't work. Because I can tell you, we actually, the Desert Storm turned out to be a very short ground war. It was, I think, 30 some odd days or something like that. It was a fairly long time. Maybe it was even 60 days of air war. But the ground war itself was literally just days, because we just plowed through everything the Iraqis had at the time. But in preparation for this, we had actually gone through training exercises. We had everyone had understood that if we actually had pools of replacement Bradleys and tanks and personnel that were moving up in the formation, so that if there's casualties, they would send in replacements quickly. They would send in crews quickly, etc. So we already had that in place. We would never have just said, okay, we were in the 2nd Armored Cav Regiment. If the unit becomes combat ineffective, they would just keep on fighting until it bleeds out, and then they would make a new Cav regiment in the back, and then at some point they would just replace it. That just doesn't make any sense historically, or even if you didn't have historical knowledge, it just doesn't make sense to fight a war that way. And that, folks, is just another one of the big, huge red flags that shows why Ukraine will not win this war, because none of the things that go into building effective combat forces, a national military power, all of them are against the Ukraine side. And even where Russia is making mistakes, and we can certainly point out a lot of those things, both at the strategic, operational, and tactical level, which they've made, going back from February 2022, and how the thing was even set up, how they resourced it, et cetera. Many, many mistakes. Russia has been learning from mistakes, but like any human organization, they still make mistakes. They still make errors. People fail in combat, et cetera. It's stuff that everybody has to deal with, but that's the whole nature of warfare. You have to slug it out and fight it out on the battlefield. Well, when one side is doing pretty good or really good in some areas, and exceptionally good in let's say, for example, in the defense industrial base categories and the natural resource categories and the man pool resources, but then the other side is just falling apart left and right. And then what assets they do have there and misusing them, you can see there's no chance. Now, that's an unemotional situation, an analysis of the situation that I can just make. Militarily, it's just true. Those are historically provable facts and valid issues that have to do with how wars are fought, won, and lost. You would hope that the leader of that group would understand that, because I'll repeat again what I said at the beginning and show you why. If you're the leader of a country and you know that you've done that analysis and you see there is no possibility, there is no path to success, then the only thing that makes sense then is, all right, we need to close this off. We need to get the best terms we can, and start looking to the future and rebuild our country, and and get as much freedom and opportunities for the future as we can. That's the only thing that makes any sense. The thing that makes no sense at all is to ignore all that stuff and then to keep on pretending like you're in a good place. And that, unfortunately, is exactly what Volodymyr Zelensky did in his recent interview with Lex Friedman.
Listen, we need to be in a strong position and not talk, but end the war. Yes, it is possible through dialogue. We're not opposed to it. You just need to be in a strong position to make the other person want it. Do you think he wants to end the war? That's what you suggested? I think this is naive. I'm sorry. With all due respect, it's naive to think he wants to finish the war.
Wow. So a little bit of incontinuity there. You have him saying, I am not going to talk to Russia, but we're not opposed to dialogue. Okay, I'm not really sure how you can talk but not talk at the same time. But perhaps reading between the lines, he's saying, well, we just have to get stronger. So once we get stronger, then we'll talk to him from a position of strength, and then we can negotiate an end that we like, which is nonsensical. It's never going to happen. I mean, I just showed you just the tip of the iceberg. We could do a whole show on all of the fundamentals that go into building national combat power and why they are irrevocably on the Russian side. But he's not listening to any of that. I mean, just looking at the map, you don't even have to go into all of those details. Just look at the map, and even your so-called new offensive blunted at the first T intersection of houses. It's not even a full village. And it's already been blunted. And because of your focus there, you're losing territory elsewhere. And literally the carotid artery of your whole operation is there. There's a knife moving towards it as we speak. And then in the east, where you claim that they can't stop anything there, that they can't move troops over there, but they don't need to because they're succeeding already. And you, as your big supporter, Julian Rupka, showed, don't have the manpower for it. Even in the places where you do have fortifications, you don't have enough manpower. Now, what do you think is going to happen on the inevitable day when the Russian army finally breaks through whatever turns out to be the last row of these good defenses that aren't manned enough? Then there's no defenses beyond that. And you don't have enough personnel. And these brigades that you keep bringing in disintegrate and fracture before they ever get to the front lines. How much longer can you go on like this and to keep this fiction going alive? And listen, I'll just say now, again, we're going to come back with a more robust show in the afternoon at 3:00 today. So tune back in for that one. But you got to also say, listen, as much as I, highlight some of Zelensky's incontinuity and his contradictions and his unwillingness to look at reality, I frankly look at the Western leaders with more disdain, because Zelensky, his heart is in this. His countrymen are in it. His whole existence is tied up with this. It's his country. But the same can't be said for all these Western leaders. And it's ironic and perverse, actually. I've seen that there's still a lot of complaining going on against Robert Fico from Slovakia and the leader of Hungary, Viktor Orban. People are still saying, oh, you're just so pro-Russian. Look, they're looking at the same map I do. They're doing the same math and calculations that I'm doing here, and they're taking the same policy path here. But instead of the rest of Europe going, oh, shoot, man, I didn't see the math. Yeah, let's go ahead and do something else. They're still doing the same as Zelensky and just keeping these lenses on that say, well, that's not the outcome I want. So I'm going to go down this path anyway and just pretend like it's valid, like there's actually a road there. It's like looking on a map that you drew, and you see this big gorge coming up ahead of there, and you'd like to get to the other side. Well, there's no bridge there. So you're going to have to go 10 miles down this way to find the next bridge and go, yeah, but I want to cross here. So I'm just going to draw a map of a bridge on there, and now I'm going to drive across it. You can say that all day long, and if somebody's just watching a video, without looking at a map, they'll go, okay, sure, I guess that makes sense, until you drive off the cliff And if you put action between your fantasy words, that's what you're going to get. And so the West, who don't have the excuse that it's their territory being killed or their people and their hearts are in it, there's not. And of course, we can accuse them, many people in the West, rightfully so, that they're after money. They're doing this because it's they get cash in for the defense industrial base and all that kind of stuff. And there's some truth to that. But there's too many people that are doing this that don't have a financial benefit. I guess they're just locked into, well, that's just what everybody's saying, so I'm going to say the same thing. I don't know, but literally, it's the best example that I've seen in a long time in conventional ways, that it's the lemming effect. Well, if that's what Zelensky's saying, we'll just follow him. And if this is what Keir Starmer's saying, and this is what Emmanuel Macron is saying, we'll just follow them off the cliff. Folks, don't follow these guys off the cliff. I mean, it's just insane that they're continuing to throw so many resources and let so many Ukrainians keep being fed into certain slaughter. Yeah, the Russians are dying at the same time. Zelensky could possibly have been right. It's not unreasonable to think that there have been 15,000 irreversible losses for the Russian side in the 6 months or the 5 months that battle's been going on. It's entirely plausible. I don't know the number, but so what? The number of Ukraine is probably significantly higher than that. And then that causes problems elsewhere because you've been sending all those resources into this absurd bulge in the Kursk area that has no significance at all militarily. And now that you haven't had all those tens of thousands of troops and all that combat power and all the ammunition that went along with it that you could have used to strengthen up those very areas that you heard Rupka talk about, that you have defenses, but you don't have the manpower for them. Why do you think they don't have the manpower for them? Where has that manpower gone? It's been wasted in the Kursk area. Something of no significance instead of the area that is your lifeblood, because once the Russians break through there, folks, it could be game over really quick. This war has been dragging on we're closing in on 3 years now, but it could have a lightning end that will seem for many people to come out of nowhere. But if you've been paying attention to Daniel Davis Deep Dive, you won't be caught off guard by this. You'll just be surprised it took this long. But that's kind of where we are right now. I'm going to come back to you at 3 o'clock, and we'll give you a more broad based on some of the things that are going on off the battlefield, and especially in the incoming administration. We'll talk about some of those issues this afternoon. For now, thank you very much for joining us. Be sure, like and subscribe if you haven't done that already. We really value that. Also, we are on podcast, and I know people can't watch all the videos all the time, but you can listen to them as you're driving, going to work, or whatever. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, wherever you get your podcasts, type in Daniel Davis Deep Dive, and you will find us waiting there for you. Thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you this afternoon on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.